Welcome to MSP Unplugged, episode number 10, Business IT Solutions That Scale. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Our show today is brought to you by Instant House Call, remote support that is easy to use, free auto PC repair to track down and kill unwanted viruses, and also free sub accounts to let your customers control their own PCs from home. Sub accounts are free until the WHO proclaims the pandemic is over. You also get half price for the first 3 months or 2 additional months free on a yearly subscription. Go to instanthousecall.com to claim your discount, place your order online, then email Corey at instanthousecall.com and tell him you're an MSP Unplugged listener. Let me introduce the co-host. We have Paco Lebron from ProdigyTeks. Paco, how you doing?
Better than good, better than most. How are you?
I am doing excellent. And we also have Robin Livesay from Uplevel Systems. Robin, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. Good to have you on the show.
Good to be here, guys.
All right. So let's go ahead and start with our personal tips or tricks or, sharing a tip or a story that we could learn from. And Paco, you're up.
Well, I'll tell you. It's been an interesting week since we last came to you, boys and girls. But essentially, with all the craziness with COVID-19, it's caused a lot of requests for remote work. And what I mean by that is a lot of small businesses, at least for my clients specifically, have mentioned what's the best and safest way to be able to work with their assets, their workflow, but remotely, safely from their own home as they try to continue their continuity for their business. So there's a couple things. One, I would suggest that you want to make sure you reach out to your clients and make sure that they either have put in a policy and sent their workers, their colleagues home or their staff, because there are a few that I actually reached out to before our governor mandated quite a few things that caused a lot of people to work remotely. And turns out that some of the businesses already had implemented a policy. And there are some that are clients that I haven't fully taken over the network, or I only do a labor only support for them. So it got the conversation going of setting up remote VPNs, making sure connections are secure in that route, making sure that there's a policy for in case there's an issue for backup and things of that nature in case a PC were to die, things of that nature. But more importantly is the communication. And I know a lot of people have struggled to what to write or how do they reach out. And actually a shout out to Bryce Woody over at TechNibble with his TechNibble marketing membership. I'm a member, and they actually had came out with a newsletter on how to talk about COVID-19 with your clients. And what I did was I was able to not only send that newsletter out along with a personalized one to the owners of my clients, but I also reconstructed it and updated it a little bit as an article on LinkedIn. So I helped with some of the engagement for that, for just not only us, but for other IT business owners to kind of see how the conversation is going, to help mention what we need to do as IT business owners to our specific clients. The other piece of it the other piece of it as well is a lot of us just don't know how to, like, in a framework, or where do I start to make sure I'm secure, and how do I make sure that I'm locked down myself as an MSP? And there's a lot of frameworks that are out there, but the one we use here is the NIST cybersecurity framework. And the cool thing about that framework is it kind of not only keeps everything all together on what you need to do on 5 sections, but PAX 8 actually released a link that kind of mentions what each individual section means and tools that they offer that will help with each of those 5 steps so that you're in compliance with the cybersecurity framework from this. So we'll have that in the show notes, but those are the 2 tips that I have for this week: is communicate with your clients, get ahead of the problem, and make sure you do your due diligence.
Very good. All right, Robin, what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so on that note, Uplevel actually just announced yesterday, along with every other company that came out with an official COVID-19 offering, we're now allowing partners to turn on our VPN for remote access workers as they need to help small businesses. So just to put that plug right there. But my tip is actually for in times like this, when we have what would be considered an unnormal situation, right? This is not what we would typically expect out of the normal working week. It reminds us to have disaster recovery plans, whether it be a traditional disaster as far as tornadoes and hurricanes, right? Natural. This is a fantastic time as a reminder to have plans in place when business can't operate as normal. Obviously, a pandemic is not something we expect in the next 20 years, but let's say, for instance, the business owner has a family emergency and needs to leave town for 2 weeks. This is the perfect time, not only to remind us to have plans in place in the event that disasters happen or out of the normal operating hours have to occur. So there's my tip of the week.
Very good. Awesome. And I'm going to continue along those lines, and I'm going to say that look for opportunities, because we look at this is what's happening here over the last couple of weeks, and we're not a news outlet, and we're not here to report on what's going on out there. Obviously, everybody can get on Facebook and learn everything you need to know, or the internet for that matter. But look for opportunities, because I think this is going to have a change in the landscape as far as how people and businesses operate moving forward. A lot of people had been working from their homes part-time. I think a lot of people, that might become more of a norm. And here's the problem is we talk about things of locking down the systems, as Paco was talking about earlier. You're going to have to do that at the home base. And whether that's VPNing into the office, or it's setting up network security at that location on premise. I think that's going to start becoming a thing, and it's not a bad idea to figure out what you can do to have each of these areas locked down to better protect your customer. So just look for opportunities as we move forward. Don't just let it go by you and not figure out that, hey, maybe there's another opportunity here to help your customer do what they need to do on a regular basis. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, on that note, we've seen a massive amount of small businesses now actually have distributed networks, far more than we would ever expect to have seen. So, right, viruses aside, I think the trend is actually moving so that small businesses are allowing their employees, if possible, to work from home as a perk. And as this labor force is so tight at the moment, offering employees flexibility around their schedules, their families, it's certainly becoming more popular.
Yes, it is. And yeah, I think it's just going to keep going that way, because it just makes sense. There is something to be said for personal interaction, and that's a whole nother topic that we won't talk about here, but there are some benefits to getting work done while you're remote versus having to drive into an office, spend the time on the road there and back. I think you can get a lot more done, not having to deal with, things like traffic and stuff like that. Right, Paco? Paco's nodding his head. All right, so let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into our main topic. Join us for the 2020 annual TechCon Unplugged, bringing the community together. Get away from your business for a weekend of learning, fun, and some new relationships in a getaway retreat. We call this a retreat because it's a time to get away from your business, reset, figure some things out, talk with peers that are going through the same thing that you are, and figure out what your strategy can be moving forward. Join like-minded business owners to help your IT business thrive. Hear from experts and get one-on-one time with peers facing the same challenges. Walk away with concrete action items to take your business to the next level. September 25th through the 27th, 2020. That's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and hopefully everything will be taken care of with this virus by then. I think it will. Anyways, go to techconunplugged.com. Get your tickets today. Arrange I'm pretty sure you can still arrange your travel arrangements and all that kind of stuff. I know some people are driving, some people will fly. Quite honestly, where we have it, a lot of people can get to via car. So it kind of works out that I'm sure your car is germ-free and you can get there.
So meaning on travel, like you mentioned, I finally got a word back, which Jeff was a part of that chain, from the airline that I was working with. They finally had confirmed that they will be able to provide us the discounts. They did confirm what the amount of the discounts will be. So, but me and Jeff are still ironing out details for everything else. So we'd like to let everyone know that you'll start seeing many big updates by the end of the month on the panels, topics, people who are speaking, possibly some new vendors, and we're going to be revealing the airlines and the discounts that we've got everyone for the attendees. And as Jeff mentioned, the main purpose of this retreat is to make it as convenient and easy for you to get to. We want to avoid any obstacles that will prevent you from coming outside of for travel. So we're going to have, again, those discounted flights for these particular airlines that we work with. We've arranged for free parking if you're driving to the conference or the retreat. And if you are also managing to come by shuttle, if you fly in, it's free shuttle from the airport to the hotel itself. So it should not be hard to get to the actual location. We try to make it as easy as possible. And as we mentioned, this is an all-inclusive event. So for your ticket price of $199, all meals are included. And that includes our Friday night social and our Saturday night social that we've had in the previous year. It was a great time to have everyone there. My understanding, everyone loved the food. Everyone felt that they were taken care of very well. And we want to continue that trend as we move into 2020. And as Jeff mentioned, hopefully all of this craziness will sort out, and we'll see you there.
And we also did beat Halo. So that was a bonus.
That was pretty fun.
Tag Team Halo. Nothing like it. That's a video game for those that don't know out there. Anyways. That was at Dave & Buster's on Saturday night. That was a good time. Okay, so Robin, can you give us a little bit of a background of where you came from and how you got to be here at Uplevel Systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually have an engineering degree. So was working primarily in signals distribution and think Wi-Fi, right? So I was working in Wi-Fi and then very quickly moved over into security, right? Wi-Fi and security are inherently linked. And several years ago was working for a company that did network visibility and testing. So think about any time that, let's say a big vendor like AT&T or Verizon goes and deploys a new, what's a great example? 5G. So they go and deploy a new amount of technology, whether it be small technology or big technology. The first thing that they have to do is verify that this is actually going to work for a large amount of their customers. So rather than calling up their million closest friends, they actually have to go and generate the traffic. I worked for the company that was doing the traffic generation. So very quickly moved into the security side of things. And that is actually where I met Tom Alexander and Glenn Chenot, two of our founders. So we actually all came out of the enterprise world and quickly realized that being an enterprise, you often get called for smaller businesses that at the time we couldn't help with our specific equipment, right? Because what small business needs to generate millions of users worth of traffic. But you often get calls from these small businesses. And that's really when we realized as a company that there is a huge gap in the marketplace for small businesses and the network infrastructure that they need that's been available to enterprises for many years, but not at a price point that small businesses could afford. So that's a little bit about my background. And then obviously here I am at Uplevel several years later. Lots of years later. And yeah, so that's kind of how Uplevel was born and how I got involved with them.
Very cool. So now, can you explain what is Uplevel and what's, kind of give us a quick overview, and then we'll kind of dive into what it can do for the business owner and what it can do for the business owner's customers.
Yeah. So like I said, we were really born out of seeing this gap in the marketplace for small businesses and the needs, and specifically around their budgets. And so with that, we went and designed a system that allows MSPs specifically. So we designed it specifically around the MSP, managing small businesses, so that they could actually go in, deploy a system that has enterprise grade infrastructure, something that a big company would use, but at a price point and reduced bells and whistles, if you will, that small businesses just don't need and can't afford, right? Those bells and whistles often add dollars, several dollar signs to pieces of equipment. So if we went down to the core pieces of business, right? Firewall, UTM, Wi-Fi, Active Directory for authentication, and user management, we could actually get to a solution that small businesses could afford and do so using a cloud implementation that allowed MSPs to easily configure, monitor, and manage the system. So that's really where we came from and how we got here, and our mission and goal in life is to make these small businesses profitable. And specifically for the business owner, it means that they now can scale up. Well, first of all, they can get into managing customers much sooner in the sales cycle, so they can bring them on. Our solution allows for them to go in and enable or disable specific services as customers grow. So they can actually start them off much lower and then rank up the amount of security, the amount of services that they're using as they need over time. Bring them into the sales cycle much sooner. It also means that MSPs can attach on their monthly recurring revenue to the hardware itself, because we are an entirely subscription-based model. And then on top of that, it means that by reducing the amount of deployment time and troubleshooting time that it takes to configure and manage small businesses, MSPs can actually make them profitable and do so at a scaled rate.
That is great. And I'll tell you, you're answering our call because, and I think you kind of alluded to this without saying it, because you're nice. I'm not going to be so nice. Our customers are cheap. So you were able to fill that gap and give us something that we can actually take to the customer and go, listen, it's not really as expensive as you think it is, and it's going to help you out in the long run.
Yeah, no, entirely. I mean, small businesses are very price conscious. We all know this, right? And joking about the virus, small businesses are the ones that are really at risk here because of how price conscious they are. Even if they operate at 30% margin, that 30% margin is, in terms of dollars, is typically much smaller than enterprise by definition. So being able to bring all those different services down to the small business at a price they can afford without asking them to write a $10,000 check for a new, server implementation is huge.
And I think the subscription model that everybody's getting into, people are becoming comfortable with that particular model because it gives them a fixed cost over time that they know that they're going to have, instead of, we're not hitting them over the head at the beginning of the year and going, hey, by the way, we need some infrastructure here, and it's going to be about 30 grand in order to get that done, because then they just freak out.
Yeah, no, it really takes the unexpected out of it, right? That's the whole goal, is to move it from an unexpected capital expenditure into an operating expenditure, right? So if lightning strikes, and I don't mean figuratively, I mean quite literally, you get an arc over some wires and it takes down a firewall, you're not all of a sudden out thousands of dollars as a small business. Right. So
Yep. That's a perfect point there. Now, Paco, obviously you have tested this system out. So anytime that you have any questions, feel free to speak up, my friend.
Oh, sure. Of course.
So anyways, Robin, let's go into, so what are some of the things that this particular device can do for us, as far as, let's dig into it a little bit and see how it's going to help us over time to better our businesses.
Yeah, so I think the two main points that we constantly get feedback on from MSPs, and the two main areas that we help address most, are the current employment rates that we're at, right? The historically low unemployment rates mean it's a very tight labor market. So being able to have an easy to deploy, easy to manage, easy to scale solution often means you can actually scale up your business without having to hire additional hands, which is huge when you're having issues hiring anyone in the first place. And kind of a B to that, if you will, a second point is the fact that we've made it very easy to configure. That's not to say that it doesn't still take some sort of networking knowledge. But it is supposed to be very easy to configure, which often means that you can actually configure the system beforehand, set it up entirely using the cloud controller. The next time the gateway is booted up and powered on, it'll pull down that configuration. And it means that you can actually reduce those deployment times and have lower level techs configure the systems, right? So again, reducing your actual expenditure on each individual customer deployment. And then a second part to that is opening up the business owner, who can often be the secondary tech, if you will, to actually scaling their business and focusing on marketing and sales efforts. To then actually grow the business, again, without having to hire additional heads on top of it.
That's huge, because anytime that we have to think of adding something to our businesses, we've got to think about who's going to do that. And
who's going to do it?
It's us, or we've got to hire somebody else to do it, right?
Yeah, and what does it do to the bottom line, right? Like, what does it mean to hire an additional employee? What does that mean for employer taxes? What happens if the business revenue goes down? All of those questions that you ask as a business owner makes a very big difference in questioning whether or not you can afford to scale a business, if you can afford to take on additional customers. So if we can actually allow MSPs to take on additional customers because we're reducing deployment and troubleshooting times, then they can actually go in and do so without having to hire additional techs. That's huge.
Yeah, there's a lot of items that you had just mentioned, and I'm going to try and unpack a little bit more on that. For a lot of MSPs, especially solopreneurs and those that are doing this on their own, you have to get some type of, if you're working on any networking, you have to get something with a cloud controller, whether it's something that you're building yourself or that the vendor offers. As you just mentioned, it's very difficult for a solopreneur to be everywhere. And especially when you want to scale to a lot more companies, a lot more businesses or bigger companies, and troubleshooting things like, the router is not working properly. The access point is somehow not giving a Wi-Fi and things of that nature. Having a cloud controller, especially for those that are looking to scale their own business and really trying to just knock it out and get on to the next thing, whether it is acquiring clients and things like that, a cloud controller is a must. I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's saved me where, recycling a managed power device, allowing me to be able to reboot a router per se, for that route, or it automatically doing that in that case. And there's many abilities to do that with the cloud controller, having a mobile app and being able to do that. Same thing with like a wireless access point, being able to figure out if it's not connecting, what's going on, things of that nature. And, kind of as Jeff mentioned, I've been testing out the Uplevel's UTM and access point for the last several weeks. And exactly like you just mentioned, Robin, it's very easy to set up. I literally just plugged it into the other port with the instructions it told me, configured what I normally would configure on passwords and things of that nature. And it was very simple to not only set up, but as I kind of let it do its thing, a lot of the simplicity of things that it was finding out was very interesting. And I'm sure you'll go into more of the details of what it does. But I will say that ease of use, along with having a cloud controller, especially for someone that is either getting into networking or wants to abandon the complicated networking solutions that they've pieced together and are looking to standardize. This was actually I could see where it would be a big hit because of just the ease of use from just using it I'm running it off right now. As we're talking on the podcast, it's working just fine right now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, we often joke that, as I was telling you before, we often joke that we have a lot of partners who actually set up the system beforehand, ship it off to the customer with a list of instructions on how to set it up, and have the customer actually deploy it themselves. So that's huge. And it's all because of the cloud controller that allows them to actually, watch what the customer is doing, right? No, that was port 3, not port 4, in real time, right? And watch what they're doing, but also to configure the system remotely or entirely out of band. The other thing that our cloud controller actually allows us to get away with, as Paco, you figured out kind of on your own, was the fact that it allows us to punch through any firewalls that are sitting in front of it. That means that you can actually plug it in behind a NATed modem. You don't have to call the ISP and wait on hold for hours and hours or fight them to actually put a modem into a bypass mode. Obviously, we recommend bypass modes for the latency issues that are induced and any sort of double NAT scenario issues that come into play afterwards. But it's a big deal in setting up, not having to do it if you don't run into those issues, right? If you're not worried about latency and the modem in front of it is actually operating fairly well, you can actually get away with not having to put it in a bypass mode or putting it behind an existing firewall if there is one.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly like you say. Even for those, like if for any of us that are supporting small businesses and co-working spaces, like I happen to be in one, and like you just said, it was able to be smart enough to figure out how to get that connection going. I didn't have to go through the whitelisting. I didn't have to go through this whole talking with the co-working space IT, but that's a whole nother question. But yeah, I mean, for those who support small businesses and co-working space, understand my pain. But it was very, like I mentioned, it was very simple to set up. I was able to get it going in a matter of maybe 30 minutes or less, and kind of getting it all kind of going. And like you said, especially for things with a complicated networking structure as a co-working space, it worked out very well.
There are actually two other points that often come up. One is the fact that we don't require static IPs under any circumstance. So that means for site-to-site VPNs, for remote access VPNs, obviously a big deal right now. But under any circumstance, we never require a static IP. So that's a reduced cost for the customer and for the MSP to not have to buy them. But second of all, it means that you can actually, because you can plug it in with an existing firewall or daisy chained behind an existing firewall, it means that migration becomes a lot easier. You can have them running in parallel and slowly move over systems without having to yank everything, plug everything back into the new firewall, and then see what happens, right? See what issues come up, what kind of, what systems aren't working at that point, what printers didn't come online, any of those issues. It makes that migration much, much easier. And it also means, from our cloud controller perspective, in the event of a disaster ever striking, we actually point the previous VM of the cloud controller over to the new piece of hardware. It pulls down all the existing configurations of the previous piece of hardware. So all those configurations are then just a plug and play. The gateway pulls down that new configuration as soon as it's plugged into the internet, powered on. And it's up and running in minutes. So disaster recovery becomes a much easier issue to deal with as well.
Now that's pretty cool. So you can basically set it up ahead of time, like you had said, send it to the customer, they can hook it up. But then if that device explodes, blows up, gets struck by lightning, whatever, then you can get another product there. All you got to do is plug it in, and it's going to pull down that firmware from the cloud, and just all the settings are right there, ready to go.
Yeah, not just the firmware, the actual configuration.
Wow.
We actually store both the configuration on the hardware piece itself, but also in the cloud controller. So the two are constantly communicating with one another, reporting back and forth. So it literally, all you have to do is call support. It's a 5-minute conversation. We point the VM, we reroute it to the new piece of hardware and overnight it to you, or you can use what's in your inventory in-house. And then from there, it is literally plug and play, right? You just plug in, port 4 to port 4, and you're up and running.
That is cool. So what are some of the other features that are featured on this equipment that we might be looking at?
Yeah, so there are several. One is obviously going to be the new Active Directory implementation that we've done in the hardware itself. So it's an LDAP implementation of Active Directory services directly into the gateway, which eliminates any need for a server implementation along with the Uplevel firewall. As we've talked about, there is a UTM. It is a firewall first and foremost, and a router and a switch and all those great things along with Wi-Fi. So those basic services are there. But then on top of that, we also have fast failover for customers using someone like Freedom Voice, for voice vendors to fail to SD-WAN between two ISP links. So whether it be two ISPs or an LTE link, fast failover allows us to actually keep those calls maintained when they're swapping between the two in the event that a primary link goes down.
That's great. Yeah, failover is a big thing that people are looking at nowadays because there are some businesses out there that need that ability to keep their phones running so that they can actually take customer calls, and it's an important part of their business.
Yeah, and we very often take for granted ISPs working, and they're obviously, depending on what part of the country you're in, um, you know, urban versus rural areas, the ISP connections, even on a good day, can be somewhat in question. So when those ISP links go down, the phones are often the first to know it, because websites might load slower, but phone calls will drop, right? So there's no connection, nothing happens. So it's imperative to keep those phone calls up, both for customer sanity and for ISP, troubleshooting, because something as simple as an ISP going down can often be misdiagnosed as an actual network configuration issue. So you start looking for things only to realize that the ISP had a blip for 5 minutes and there's not some sort of anomaly going on. So saving time there is huge.
I had that same issue with a client who they purchased their own firewalls. They had 2 different ISPs. And as we were trying to figure out and work on the failover wasn't working. And we were trying to figure out, why isn't it working? Everything's set up. We got everything code to do, and it's got the high availability between the 2. It was just working an hour ago. So we plugged directly into the AT&T modem, and AT&T was down an hour after we were there.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up being why the failover wasn't working, which is the secondary. So exactly like you mentioned, if you don't take that into consideration, that you think it's a network issue as you're setting it up, and it just happened to be the ISP just went out right when we were setting up what we were there to do.
Yeah, and the most frustrating one is always the ones that are going up and down, right? So it just so happens the second that you test the ISP link and plug your computer in, it's working fine. And then, you go and plug in the firewall and pull the primary link, and all of a sudden it stops working, and or the phones go down. And it's those minor issues that all of a sudden take up so much time trying to troubleshoot and figure out what in the world is actually going on, only to find out, oh, they're incredibly unstable and dropping to 0 every 30 seconds. It's not helpful.
Right. Wow.
So we actually have a very interesting customer out in Hawaii. The same customer that the MSP actually just drop shipped the hardware out to the customer and had them deploy it. They are obviously, Hawaii's very far and has questionable internet service, much like most islands. Don't exactly get the most quality internet service out there, not to name any ISP names. But they were having an issue where actually their credit card processor, they had a 2-step credit card processor in place, and it's a grocery store. They had a 2-step credit card processor, and the ISP was falling so frequently that about 200 customers every year would get charged twice, if not more than twice, because of a delay in either the credit card processor getting the transaction, approving it, and it not making it all the way back to the firewall, right? So the cash register doesn't ever look like it got approved, so please swipe your card again. Or it missing that second step for the approval, right? That's massive for small businesses. So they actually implemented an LTE failover, and having that failover is life-changing for them.
Wow. Well, that's a great use case scenario for that, for sure. All right. So what are some of the other things that we could be looking at on this device? I'm looking at the list, and obviously there's a list on the website, and we'll have links to all that kind of stuff. But I just found it interesting that there's a lot of things that this thing can do.
Yeah, there's a ton, right? So we've talked about the UTM. There's obviously an IPS-IDS, deep packet inspection firewall, built into it. We have country blocking, content filtering, so that's going to be your DNS filtering. Obviously, we talked about remote access VPNs, very pertinent right now, as well as site-to-site VPNs for any gateways tying themselves together. Like I said, it is inherently a firewall and a router and a switch. So there are 7 ports, 7 LAN ports built into the gateway itself. But then on top of that, you've got Wi-Fi access in additionally. You can plug in as many access points as you need. They are broken out as separate pieces of hardware. So you can scale up and down as you need and put the access points actually where they're needed, as opposed to the closet where the gateway is probably living. And then switches. Yeah, exactly. And then switches additionally. But then on top of that, we've talked about failover and those impacts on voice calls. But then on top of that, you can actually QoS phone calls over data to ensure that they actually get through for customers with lower ISP links or just high phone volume on those data lines to ensure that those packets always get out. So that's included in the firewall as well. What else? The Active Directory, obviously, that we've talked about. That implementation, again, is huge as far as cost reduction goes for not having to implement an entire server implementation. And then on top of that, we actually reduce the CAL requirement, the client access licenses. So it actually means that MSPs can manage more devices now because they don't have to convince those small businesses who are price conscious to go and fork out additional money to manage all of their devices. So it means that MSPs can manage all of those iPads that they're using in the restaurants or out in the field, or additional client laptops that might have been in question because they weren't really needed for the domain access, but they certainly are needed for the audit logs, and the owner of the business wants to see what they're doing and what they're getting into and what they're logging into.
Wow.
So those are kind of the main features of the firewall. There is a lot there.
So, I mean, as far as the firewall features, and it sounds like the firewall can do a lot of different things as far as protecting the end customer from, bad things coming in. I'm sure it's got the, it's checking what's going in, what's going out, that type of thing, and making sure that it's all legit. I'm sure. And is it based on a whitelist, blacklist type thing? And is that something that's kind of pre-set up, or is that something you kind of set up on the fly?
Yeah, so either and both. So there's a stateful port blocking firewall that's obviously blocking any unsolicited traffic from getting in. There's geo-blocking, right? So whether it's going in or out, blocking it based on the country that it's going to, right? There are obviously, namely countries, Iran, China, Russia, that obviously come to mind initially, that no one should ever be communicating with. So that's both an inbound and outbound. And then there's IPS IDS that's inspecting both inbound and outbound traffic. So that's going to be legitimately requested traffic that's being inspected in and out from customers. So think about whenever customers go to websites, clicking on links and whatnot, checking that traffic to make sure it is clean and legitimate. And those are done based on the policy that you set initially. So you can change it at any time, but it is based on kind of the aggressiveness, whether it's just alerted on or dropped immediately, depending on the attack level that it comes in at. And then on top of that, there's domain filtering to help or prevent entirely customers from getting to known bad domains. So that would be clicking on websites that they shouldn't be going to, or trying to access content that they shouldn't be seeing. To prevent that access, that's going to be a DNS resolution, right? We just block the resolutions from known bad websites. And again, blacklisting and whitelisting as you need to segregate those out to ensure that they can actually get to odd websites that may look weird initially, but it's actually legitimate for the business because they do operate, maybe a credit card processor in an odd location or something like that.
Now, Paco, let me ask you this: what types of things, when you were setting this thing up, what was your first impression, and what was easy to use, and what features did you say, hey, I'm going to need that. I really, this is going to work well for what I need.
Sure. I think the fact of the matter is that this box can do so much. And I think it's one of those where, I could say that it's an all-in-one type deal. It has many features to allow, and I'm sure Robin will go into more of them, but I think the biggest piece for me on the configuration of it was the way that the dashboard works. I think the dashboard, I'm big on dashboards that are easy to use, easy to navigate. There are a couple that, new products that I've joined, and I'm trying to figure out how the heck do I do XYZ, and I got to go through viewing some training and things like that. And with Uplevel systems, I don't even think I even emailed support once on trying to figure out, okay, how do I run the diagnostics? Because, okay, so let me back up. So the big piece I really love is the dashboard when you first log in. It gives you, of all the products that you have attached to the UTM that you've signed up with Uplevel, it gives a red, yellow, and green type of status. And you know me with my colors, I love that. So when it comes to that, it really was telling me when I first set it up that the ISP connection was unstable. So it was yellow, and I was trying to figure out, well, okay, what's going on? Clicked into it. It was telling me some things to try out. I did a unplug and plug back in type of situation because I'm lazy. Went ahead and did that, and it uplink stable. Another cool feature that it basically allows you to give you a snapshot of what's going on with the network right when you log in. So, if for whatever reason, let's say you deployed it with a client, or let's use the example of a client. You deployed with a client, have the Wi-Fi AP access point set up. It says, hey, we're detecting a lot of interference on this channel. You may want to take a look. And this allows you to, and there's some other things that you could do inside the access point, but that right away tells you, hey, this client just complained about the Wi-Fi being kind of spotty. I just logged in, it said this. Let me figure out if it's a channel situation. Is it something else? And, you kind of go into that detail, figuring out what's what. And I think those two pieces really, really were helpful for me, along with the setting up the VPN, and I'm looking at the dashboard right now, being able to do the diagnostics. I think a lot of that is just so easy to use. And there's one thing that I don't think Robin mentioned is that how easy this looks on your mobile phone or on a tablet, because it's easily formatted to look the same way as you see it on your desktop browser. When you log in initially to see that dashboard, you see those rows of the individual things you have set up, whether it's the backup, AD, Wi-Fi, etc. All of them are in a good straight row in that color schema to help catch your eye on a quick glance of what needs to be attacked if there is any complaints network-wise.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. We really designed the dashboard specifically for MSPs so that they could easily deploy, like I've said, manage and monitor customer systems. So we really put a lot of emphasis on making sure that troubleshooting is really easy. You can run, like you said, it'll alert you whenever things aren't acting right from our end. But let's say, for instance, a customer calls and said, things just don't seem right, or the printer starts going offline and the phones aren't working right. You can actually run diagnostics directly from the gateway itself, remotely out of that cloud controller and out of the dashboard. So you can go in and run ISP, both quick bandwidth tests and long bandwidth tests to run over, say, a week if you want, every 5 minutes, have it run. You can also run Wi-Fi interference scans to see if there are any neighbors that are really loud at the moment. Maybe they've got their up-level access point right next to the ISP modem. The ISP modem still has its Wi-Fi turned on. All of a sudden, they're just screaming at each other. Clients can't hear either of them. So troubleshooting issues like that, we really put an emphasis on making it very clean, very easy, and MSP friendly, so that you can see all your customers right off the bat, who's got issues, who doesn't, like you said, with those red, yellow, and green alerts as needed. But the really important thing is the fact that the gateway has a ton of features and functionality built into it. But that functionality is actually on a per need basis. So you can go in and enable or disable services as you need. And that talks really back to the whole scalability of it. So let's say, for instance, you have a customer that doesn't need an AD at all. So why would they ever turn that on, right? They're a two-man shop. They definitely don't need AD for authentication, and they're not HIPAA compliant required. So that's something that's just out of their scope and out of their budget. Then don't turn it on, right? You don't get billed for it. They don't get billed for it. And our relationship's only ever with the MSP. But it means that you can actually bring those clients on much sooner, not change out the infrastructure. And then as they grow to say 10, 15, 20, 30 employees, you can actually grow with them. And rather than asking them to actually fork out additional money for any additional services, you just go into the dashboard, like I said, from anywhere using that cloud controller, enable or disable services. So you don't have to go on site to enable additional services. You'll just go in, type enable, click on whatever buttons you need to, and it'll be up and running. This is really important for the UTM specifically. So as we had some interesting times here in the past, we had a couple of countries that were thought to be good, and then turns out not so much. Iran is the one that I'm talking about. And all of a sudden we saw a huge spike in the number of attacks that were coming in from Iran all of a sudden. So MSPs were very easily able to go into the dashboard, turn on country blocking, in the dead of night, or, without having to go on site, enter Iran into a blacklist, and all of a sudden, their customers are protected right then and there. So it's massive.
Now, Robin, when you talk about in Paco, when you're talking about the ease of the interface and how nice and easy it is for the normal person to, for those that don't know, when Paco, myself, and Robin got on a phone call before we did the podcast, just to kind of do a meet and greet, I made a comment about engineers before I found out that Robin was an engineer. Then I had to quickly backpedal and go, no, that's not what I meant.
So see what I go through, Robin, all the time. Jeez.
Right.
But when it comes to the interface, was that something that you got feedback from the MSPs, or do you guys have a design team there that actually had looked at that and said, hey, here's some of the things that are out in the market right now, and here's how I think we can make this simpler?
Yeah, so both, right? Like I said, we actually all came out of for the most part, out of the enterprise space. So we had a good feel about what was in the marketplace. If you ask any of our partners, the first thing that they'll probably tell you is we are very open to any feedback. So we love hearing what partners have to say, what they're seeing, what issues that they're running into. We often call on our partners to ask about, what do you think about this feature or that feature for a roadmap for 2020? How does this look? What are you seeing in the field? So we're constantly obviously evolving, as any company is, but really, really open to feedback, because MSPs are truly the boots on the ground, and the ones that are using it every day and whose lives that we're trying to make easier. It is so important that we actually listen and hear what they have to say about the dashboard. So it was kind of a mixture of both, of us kind of knowing what was in the marketplace, and obviously what we have to do to support our personal family businesses, when we get support calls from them, but then additionally listening to our partners all the time.
And then my understanding is, from what I'm hearing, so is this channel friendly? Is channel only?
Oh, we're channel only.
Okay.
Yeah, we only ever sell through MSPs. We will never sell direct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not in our business model at all. It frankly takes a lot more boots on the ground to deploy, manage, and we heavily rely on our MSPs. In addition, we only ever sell to the MSP. We don't care who the end customer is. So we only ever bill the MSP, right? We very rarely actually know the physical address of the customer. So yeah, we're entirely channel based, and will be for forever.
We like that from the aspect of it's hard because you have customers that will go to places like Amazon and go, hey, I can get this thing for X amount of dollars, and your thing costs this over here. And it's like, and it's never the same. It's never apples to apples, right? It's always apples to oranges, and it's hard to get the customer to understand it. So when you're doing channel only, it's like you're taking all that out of the equation as far as dealing with the customer and going, listen, this is what I support. This is what I know. So this is what we're going to bring to you. And here's the support that I have behind me to help us do what we need to do to make your business better.
Yeah, entirely. I mean, I frequently get asked, how do I find your pricing online? And that's to say, our pricing isn't anywhere online. Very intentionally, we won't ever advertise any pricing online, in YouTube, anywhere. And that's entirely to respect and acknowledge the MSP's role in this, and to make sure that there's never a reference point that customers can make. Not to say that they shouldn't, but because the MSPs are supporting it, we really value that support. And we won't even take calls from customers other than to say, here's the number you should probably be calling based on your location and who we think you might be. So
that's very good. And obviously, you guys have a support team there that is supporting the equipment. Because I mean, that's the other thing too, is a lot of times not to be funny, but we're calling and support is not located anywhere, near us that we can actually mitigate in a easy fashion. And so it kind of gets frustrating. So, and I've said this for a long time, I believe businesses that can get the support down are going to win in the marketplace, because in my opinion, is key today.
Yeah.
Good support.
That's a great question. So we actually very, very frequently, in talking to partners, get incredible accolades for our support. We have entirely US-based support. Almost all of the support team is actually a degreed engineer or an engineer by trade, or as was at one point operating their own MSP. So really, really knowledgeable support team. And most importantly, very easy to reach. You're not going to sit on an hour long wait times, of constant ringing. Very often you'll get one of us, typically you'll know us by name, replying to emails within minutes or hours, whatever the situation is, or answering the call directly, regardless of the situation. So we have a lot of partners who actually prefer to use us for the support. In the event that not everything is perfect, they need back-end logs all of a sudden because they're deploying. It's really, really imperative. And the one thing our support team is actually known for is getting to the root of the problem, right? Whether it be ours or not, we can often, because we're the router, see all the traffic and be able to very quickly tell you, oh, this isn't working because the router is not responding, or there's a port that's blocking it, or you thought it was coming in on this port number and it's coming in over that one. So that's really important, is having a support team that's behind you as an MSP to make sure that you're successful, when you're standing there in front of the customer.
That's worth its weight in gold for sure. I know a lot of people would love that type of support when they're dealing with this stuff, because you're already under the gun when you're trying to figure stuff out on the fly, and it's like it might be something that you can't see, and it's always great to have that that's extra set of eyes that can look at something and go, yeah, here's what we're seeing, or pointing you in the right direction. And I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's go ahead. We're going to take a real quick break, but if you guys could gather up your thoughts. Robin, anything we haven't talked about, any other points that you want to bring up about Uplevel, and things that we haven't touched on yet? And Paco, any lasting thoughts from you? But before we do that, if you'd like to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. And I want to thank our newest Patreon supporter, Derek Villers. Thank you, Derek, for supporting the show. And I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. It's about $1 a show. And what that does is it gets you into our super secret Facebook group, even though Facebook doesn't call it that anymore. I think they call it private group now. How boring. But we're going to continue to call it the super secret Facebook group because it just sounds better. And that is a group where you can get in and ask questions and not be looked down upon, no matter what your question is, no matter how simple it might be. We're just a friendly group of techs. And if people are not being friendly, I have my good friend Paco here who will boot you out of the group. No questions asked. Doesn't even have to ask my permission. It just happens.
With pleasure.
Yes.
But the reason why I say that is because I think that we just got into a point where there's a lot of MSP IT business owner groups in vast industries, and I see quite a lot of them, and I've left a few because it kind of got out of hand where, a tech is asking a specific question, and for whatever reason, they are just, said all kinds of things, whether it's ask Google, why are you even asking this? Are you a true tech? Things like that. Are you a true IT business owner? And I see where some of that, okay, but there's a lot of them where it really demeans the person on even reaching out for help. And that's what we are all about here. So that's why we made sure to, if you did support the podcast through the Patreon group, we have not had this issue in the Facebook group. We've had a great time, a lot of great interaction and engagement with everyone. There have been a few that were on dicey terms, but they've straightened up since then. But, again, it's just that reason. And that's why we have zero tolerance for anyone, talking about another tech, or if it's just a matter of, they feel like they know it all and, have a go against a question, we just don't appreciate that. And like Jeff says, you're out. So play nice or get out of the sandbox. So.
And we appreciate everybody's opinions on things like that. It's not that we're against opinions or anything like that. Just be respectful when you say things to other people. And, kind of like if you were standing in the same room with them. Anyways, that's you can go to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged, sign up today, and that will get you into the group. All right. So, Robin, is there anything that we have not touched on as far as this product? I guess I'm going to say just off the cuff that they're going to have to try this thing in order to see what it can do.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously get the most support after people have tried it out for their own. So we obviously highly recommend people go to our website, sign up for a demo, test out a system on their own, see how it goes. I think the one feature that I haven't mentioned is actually the fact that there's built-in, Paco, I think you slightly mentioned it, but there's built-in storage as well as cloud and archiving in the gateway itself. So that's the one thing that I forgot to mention. But I think the really important thing is the fact that we're offering IT infrastructure that's incredibly scalable and incredibly durable and enterprise grade. So it's got great performance to small businesses that previously couldn't afford it. So we're really trying to make an impact on how those small businesses run in good times and in bad.
Now, you said it's got built-in storage. So is that like a NAS type device?
Mm-hmm.
Built in? Oh, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's got a 1 or 5 tera NAS built into it. So there are obviously 2 different form factors with the 2 different NAS sizes. And again, if a customer starts off with a 1 tera NAS and outgrows it over time, again, you just point that cloud controller VM from the previous 1 tera gateway. We'll ship you a 5 tera gateway, pull down the configuration, and you're up and running. And if they're using cloud backups, we can actually restore the entire 1 tera NAS onto the 5 tera gateway, ship it out pre-configured for you with all the data already existing on it.
Wow, Paco, you really said it when you said all in one, man.
I'm telling you, there's a ton of stuff in this thing. I mean, I think I've had it for what now 3 weeks or so. Maybe I've had it for a month. I set it up probably 3 weeks ago. And I still haven't even gone through all the features that it could do. I mean, down to, checking a box to reserve an IP address if you don't have your reservations, alerting if the device is not online. It's a lot of the minute little details that are really what's the term Repair Shopper and Synchro uses? Quality of life updates. They essentially help those little things make a difference on a lot of the times that you're troubleshooting, figuring out things. And again, like having deployed it for now 3 weeks, and actively checking it, I still haven't even gone through all of the mass features that it has so far.
Yeah, there's a lot built into it. But we're certainly seeing customers, and MSPs actually find the value out of being able to deploy it quickly, right? Because typically what you get in an all-in-one solution or in a high-tech infrastructure is it takes a lot to configure. So we want to reduce those times and actually make it very easy to configure so that you can actually acquire the customer and then move on, right? Deploy new infrastructure and not ask that they have a large capital expenditure to get all those new features that they need and only bill them for what they're using.
Yeah, and if Paco can set it up, I mean, it's got to be easy.
Well, he's an engineer, so he knows.
That's right. Oh,
exactly.
Oh, well, yeah, it sounds like definitely. So I guess with that being said, Paco, do you have any lasting thoughts on anything that we talked about today?
No, I mean, exactly like what Robin mentioned. For those that are interested in just taking a look under the hood, they have a demo website that you can, when you sign up to be interested in the product, you can kind of go through, but really you want to get your hands on the device and really figure out how it works, how it plays in the real world, because that's really where you're going to determine if this is a fit for your business. And not only if it's a fit, but what can it consolidate as well, because again, John Dubinsky preaches this, you preach this, I preach this. Standardizing on your stack is the biggest thing that you can do. And if this is something that will allow you to not have to purchase 15 million devices to connect to make your infrastructure as it is, and if you have one device that you can help set up and really gain the recurring revenue, or just add project work, that can take that ease of use and still gain a lot of margins, or gaining a lot of the money that you would have spent otherwise in hardware costs, this is a great thing to look at. So definitely take a look. If you really want to take a look at the hood, you really got to want to get your hands on it to really try it out, because that was the only way I could see kind of what it was able to do for our network.
So Robin, how would people get signed up and get a demo with you guys to go through the process?
Yeah, so a couple of different things that you can do. First of all, our website's a great resource. If you ever fill out a contact form there, we will obviously set you up with a demo. So there is a demo link on our website that you can click on. It's just uplevelsystems.com, and then request a demo from there. There's also a link in the website itself to go and check out our UI dashboard. So it's obviously a GUI demo that you can go and play around with and see all those different features that Paco was mentioning around, the different colors and what it looks like to get alerts and what kind of things that we alert on. You can always do that on the website as well. It's just uplevelsystems.com. Very easy. You can also Google us. We'll come up. We also have Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you don't want to open Google, that also works as well. You can do all of those things. Yeah.
Very good. And we will have links to all of that in the show notes for everyone to check out.
One feature I did want to mention that our good friend, and the reason why we got to know about Uplevel Systems, was our friend over at Paul Mandiola over at Freedom Voice was the one that had mentioned, because they had some exciting news that they had mentioned that they were partnering with you guys. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that announcement?
Yeah, so we've officially partnered with Freedom Voice, like we've kind of talked about with the SD-WAN capabilities, to allow partners a full solution around both phones and the gateway and the infrastructure that runs it, to give additional visibility into the network, and then to deal with all of those failover issues that we've talked about. So we're really, really excited. Freedom Voice is an awesome company. They've been fantastic to work with. And like I said, Freedom Voice is, we can actually maintain their phone calls whenever they fail over, which is huge. It's not true with every VoIP vendor, specifically why we wanted to partner with them. But you can, like I said, whenever you're failing over from a primary link to a secondary, whether it be another ISP or an LTE link, will actually maintain the phone call during those few seconds that it fails over, which is really important. So we're really excited about that partnership. It actually opens a lot of doors for our partners in deploying new systems and having full visibility into both the phone system and the Uplevel network. And to your point around standardizing, whenever you kind of standardize, you actually get greater visibility into what's going on, because oftentimes there's a lot of misconfigurations between just the two devices, and not having visibility into the greater picture. You often lose a lot of the valuable information as to what's going on, right? And specifically with support teams, right? One person will say one thing, the other person will say another thing. So we often hear a lot around, trying to troubleshoot multi-vendor infrastructure, specifically with routers and firewalls, that being an issue quite often. So we're excited about the partnership and what it kind of opens up for partners and deploying to small customers. Excellent.
All right, Robin, if people wanted to get in contact with you, obviously we got the website. Is there any way that they could contact support, or any emails that you want us to give out on the show?
Yeah. Support is just going to be support@uplevelsystems.com. I know, very difficult. So systems is plural, so systems.com. And then if anyone wants any additional information, again, very difficult, uplevelsystems.com, or sales@uplevelsystems.com will always get you anywhere. And then if they ever want to email me directly, that's also more than welcome. My email is, again, difficult, Robin@uplevelsystems.com. So it's ROBIN, like the bird, the same way that you would spell the animal, that's how you spell my name, and then uplevelsystems.com. So anyone's more than welcome to reach out. We obviously highly encourage, if there are any questions around yeah buts, how abouts, what ifs that we can anytime answer, we're more than happy to.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all your knowledge with us. I learned a lot, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This was a blast.
And Paco, if people wanted to find out more about you, where would they go?
Oh, they can come to this fine programming that we have every Sunday live at 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time. Or you can catch me if you want to buy me a beer and shake my hand after this whole coronavirus thing is over at TechCon Unplugged, September 25th to the 27th in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Can you buy you a Corona still, though?
Absolutely.
You can watch the show live and hang out in the chat room over on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. You can also subscribe using your favorite podcatcher to never miss an episode. And thank you for subscribing to the show. We will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.